I'm just going to, good afternoon, is it on? Hello, everybody. I don't know if you can hear me well, but good afternoon. Appreciate you being here. We do have a couple other members. There we go. I was going to say, I didn't hear the feedback. So anyway, thank you all for being here for our Academic Support Subcommittee meeting today on February 10th. We are going to be here to discuss and listen to House Bill 1217. I will ask for the folks that are here to be mindful. There's a couple other members that are tied up in other committee meetings, and they'll be here shortly. But we're going to go ahead and allow the bill sponsor to start the discussion. We do have the room for up until 2:30. We will use that time if we need it. But if we do not need that time, we have 3 people here to speak on the bill. So what I would say is we probably will not need the entire time. So unless we need to modify, we'll just adjust accordingly based on how the discussion goes with the bill sponsor. So yes.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a request? As the speakers go through the bill, can we have someone just kind of walk us through each section?
Sure.
Since this is a sub, it'd be very helpful. Because I have a lot of questions, but they could probably head off a number of them if they could just walk us section by section and tell us what this does.
Sure. I have a feeling that the sponsor of the bill probably has that as his plan. I think he that's sort of his style, but I appreciate the input. Thank you. All right. I would like, if he doesn't mind, before you speak, could we ask Chairman Dooman if you'd lead us in prayer? 22. Got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. Dear God, Lord, I just thank you for this day. I thank you for the blue skies and sunshine outside, Lord. I just thank you for allowing us to be here today to do the work that you've set us to do on behalf of the people of Georgia. Just give us wisdom and guidance and understanding to make the right decisions for all those who we serve. Lord, we thank you for Jesus and what he means to us. We ask all these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you very much. All right. And it's this one here, I guess. Okay. All right. At this time, I will turn it over to the bill sponsor, Representative Irwin. Chairman.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and representatives of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present Bill 1217 to you. Let me begin by, instead of just covering it, Representative, if you don't mind, in pieces, let me describe it first, and then we can walk through it, I think, and maybe we'll answer the questions that we have, if that will be okay with you. Just some opening statements that I wanted to make to you is that what this is a Student Technology Protection Act. What we're thinking about is our students first here, and we're thinking about protecting them. I want you to know that education, much like our entire community, has been turned on its ear with how we are educating our children. And that being said, we were blessed in this state to have the ability to do it virtually. But we increased virtual learning dramatically. I think just about everybody in this state are aware of how our kids went through the learning the last year and a half or up to 2 years, on using state equipment, using handheld devices such as Chromebooks, such as iPads, to learn, all connected to the internet and all used servers within our school system. And so we had taken or paid some attention to House Bill 1055, by the way, that was first written in 2006. What I do want to point out is these iPhones were not invented and in your hand in 2006. They came out in 2008 to us. So when we wrote the current bill that we are addressing here, it was internet usage. And we are protecting now and securing that environment that so many of our schools are using. And I believe every one of the school systems are heavily involved in virtual learning today. So I also want to point out to you that there is a federal law in place if you want to receive your E-rate money from the federal government, that there was a federal law that was first put into existence in 2000 and was lastly updated in 2011. And that is the Children's Internet Protection Act. So CIPA, as they call it, CIPA. And CIPA, again, was in Congress in 2000, updated in 2011. I give you those dates because if we are solely requiring the security of our materials for our students, such as their Chromebooks, iPads, on a 2011 technology bill from the federal government, that would not meet my standard, not only as a past educator, but as a parent, to protect that environment that those children are learning in and around. So I'm trying hard to walk you through some of the impetus to this bill, and then to look at it and what it can do for our school systems, for our students, and for our parents. You know, a few points I want to hit on before I go through it. This bill taps into the DOE's expertise in filtering and grade appropriate material, and involves the DOE in providing sufficient information to systems so that they can then protect their devices, their servers, ultimately their students, and respond to their parents in those requests. It provides the parent transparency and permission that I explained or will explain here, monitoring the online activity. When I say monitoring online activity, let's talk about off task. We have good enough technology today that if we know a student is off task rather than on task, that we have the technology to use that. We also have that same technology can tell us that we're researching something that should not be researched at that grade level. So that monitoring of what the students are learning and how much time they're spending on it is in here and valuable. And of course, it would then also be able to monitor how much harmful content, and that is sent to the administration. And then the administration can then appropriately deal with the issue that came through. Protecting our students from any of this harmful content. I want to express that when we began looking into this, and the word gets out, you're looking at it, you become a magnet for the problem that has occurred. And I've had multiple parents come to me. Examples, I will give you at least one here, was my daughter looked last night, and this happened just this past week, was researching a topic online, went to Google Earth on her school paid for device, looked at the Great Wall of China, and ended up with a picture from the Great Wall of China on Google Earth of a full frontal naked picture of a male and some inappropriate material. He took a picture of it. He then notified his administration of the issue. And my question was to him was, you notified, did any of the technology notify the administration that occurred? Those type of things don't need to happen in the environment we need to have for our children. And we need to protect our kids and stop that from occurring. Walking through this this bill some for you, I think we can start there on page Two, I think would work quite well. Just walking through, you'll see dates. We're updating because this was a 2006 bill.
Go ahead and read for us the LC number, sir.
Excuse me, you're correct. LC, I got 490840S.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. Methods in promoting safe and appropriate use of technology and responsible digital citizenship. I'm just going to keep walking you through it. You'll see the definitions on page 3. The first definition was the acceptable use policy, and what it was, as you can see, we struck through internet usage and internet use because there is many different uses for the internet today versus what it was in 2006, or governing body of a charter school. We've added, you'll see then, definitions of child pornography, and then we define child pornography going on down through. Representative, please stop me if you would. I don't mind if you get the question I don't answer, Representative Wilson. Let me see. We felt it was very important to not only define acceptable use, but also harmful to minors is what that is. Now, I'm going to tell you, as you read through some of this that is lined through here, some of these words, just based on the law that we have to put in there, can be offensive. So, you know, just as a little bit of a warning to those. And then, of course, we're continuing on page 4. Obscene material means materials that meets the following requirements to an average person, applying contemporary community standards. So in other words, leaving local control there, that the parents who presently have the ability to come in and talk to their administration, talk to their school board about what they think is appropriate to that grade level. The material taken as a whole lacks serious literacy, political, scientific value, and material depicts or describes in an offensive way sexual conduct. I'm gonna keep moving on. Acts of sexual intercourse. You know, I'd rather not, Mr. Representative, read all these out loud if that's okay with you. Okay. But we felt it was important to have it in the law, I will tell you, so it clearly defined what we were saying is offensive to people. I believe when we get down into some of the other sections here, you're going to see dates that we tried to realign so that systems had time to talk about it, not only for the SIPA requirements, but also for before the end of their year, so that the community know where they were at on their policies, and then could get it inside their handbooks that they deliver to the children to begin the next school year. So that's why date changes. We also talked about being able to control these devices away from school, so not on campus. Hold on.
Is it line 121, line 120 and 121?
Yes, and then on to 123, 24, and 25. Do you see it? Whether or not students, or bottom of page 5, I believe, whether or not such students or school employees was at the time of such violation on school property, on a school bus, or at a school-related function or elsewhere. So we are protecting that device and filtering that device. And remember, each individual in this bill, each individual device is filtered. And then when they access the server also, the server has firewalls and protection, at the school level. So you'll see that all the way through that section there through 125. Then going on down to 127, you provide an administrative procedures to address complaints regarding possible violations of acceptable use. I think, we've defined it now. Now we're getting into how we go through the process of complaining. Same thing on down as you're working through page 6. We added, we are allowing them to upgrade. We knew technology changes so frequently. We wanted the systems and the DOE the ability to upgrade that technology and then to recommend maybe a better filter or a better server, all the way down at the bottom of 147 and 148. We give a timeline for notifications as the complaints come through, and then how we're going to respond back to a parent that has complained and who is doing that. We talked about authorization, to work for the department is authorized to collaborate with the Department of Administrative Services. This would assist them, I believe, in purchasing. If we're looking to do this on a larger scale in the future, this would give the DOE the ability to involve DOA to help them with the purchasing recommendations they would make. Going on to page 8. Now we've involved, I think you'll see in these sections, the DOE and their expertise, and beginning with assisting with the requirements for this code section, also training for school personnel, working with the schools with complying with acceptable use policies, basic cybersecurity. I think many of us have heard about what phishing is on these emails, and there can be a lot of good training that might save some money for a school system or save viruses. That type of training was also put in here. Other content, emerging issues and topics which address the safe and secure use of technology by students and educators is part of that training. The state board is going to review at the bottom. You will see each acceptable use policy and technology protection measures and provide any revisions or updates that they see that schools need. Flipping over to page 9. And I think important to point out in line 210, the state board shall be authorized to withhold a portion of the state funding allotted for a school. What I mean by that and what we're allowing there is if they're not meeting their timelines for the acceptable use, the State Board of Education will have the ability to say, and the intent here is to push them along to get that timely acceptable use policy turned in and then communicated with their parents, or if they are not good players. If the school board isn't doing what it needs to secure its environment, the State Board of Education, I believe the State Board of Education already has this authority. If they want to do this type of thing, we're just codifying it right here for this purpose and letting school boards know that you need to take the security of these devices and of your servers, whether it's on campus or off campus, seriously. Okay, I think that'll finish page 9. Pretty much the same, page 10.
I always forget the mic. Chairman Dubnik, go ahead.
So Representative Irwin, on page 10 is, I believe we're just in those final updates of technical language. Is that okay? I didn't want to cut you off before I asked some questions of you.
Yes, let me, I am here. The only thing that I think I need to add to you, Chairman Dubnik, is the fact that we also, as you can see with the DOE, we've got a standard for the DOE in here too. We want them to respond in 30 days. They can ask for 30 more days to respond after an investigation. But we want not only for the school to be able to respond back to the parents, but we want the DOE to be able to respond back to the school system also. And so we have directed that in this bill. But yes, that would be the only thing, Mr. Chairman.
I've just got a bunch of questions that'll probably a yes or a no will
Okay.
suffice. So I've never made it a point to correct a member, but you started off with a statement that in the technology standards from 2011 were not good enough for you as a former educator or as a parent. But aren't you also a new grandparent? And wouldn't you believe that the change in technology from 2011 to 2022 is going to be a pretty large change, no different than it will be from 22 to 33 for your grandchild to experience, and that technology is something that grows exponentially each year? Would you agree with that?
I would, yes.
And I want to commend you for the idea that you brought up, that this is about protecting our children, that this is a technology-based bill that is to serve our families and to protect those youngest learners. You mentioned earlier about filtering on grade level, and that something that a child at a specific age we may want this type of technology to block may be different than an older child's. Could you speak to that just a little bit, as far as this is not a one size fits all filter or block, that this is adaptive technology that school systems would have the ability to control at a grade level? Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes, sir. In education, we call it grade appropriate. And we have been doing grade appropriate for a long time when we set up our curriculums. And so as you'll see in here, there's grade appropriate material. And we have also got in here that there is a measure to where there can be a white list of information that can be researched by, let's just say, the difference between 11th grader and a 3rd grader. And that material wouldn't be appropriate for a 3rd grader, but would be appropriate for 11th grader. So we can do it by school, or we can do it by individual subject that is grade appropriate. An example I would tell you would be medical research. There's some medical research that would not be appropriate for a 3rd grader to research, but there would be appropriate for a junior or senior in high school who is considered on a healthcare profession that we would need to allow, so that we have that security in this bill to allow the discretion to develop a white list of what can work in the schools.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. All right, I'm going to, just to let folks know, we're going to have, I want to make sure, Representative Irwin, Chairman, are you ready? Anything else you want to cover in the bill before we open up to other members' questions? I just want to make sure there wasn't any last points. And then if you are ready.
If you let me say one
Yes.
last point, and then I'm
Yes.
ready to turn it over. The SIPA, which was the Children's Internet Protection Act, is what we got. What we've done here is we're relying on Washington to put the really checks and balances on securing our devices and securing our internet for our virtual learning, and not providing much assistance to our local educational units that we have here in this state. This is putting Georgia, putting our standard in there and protecting our own children, not just relying on Washington to do that with this regulation.
Okay.
So I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to add that.
I'm going to take chairman's prerogative here, and I'm going to ask just a couple questions, and then I'm going to turn it over. And just to let the folks know, we've got Representative Wilson, then online we've got Representative Wynn, and then we will go to Representative Evans after that. But my question is I know you're a former superintendent. You've got a passion for education and students. Tell me and walk me through a little bit of some of the work that you've put into this as it relates to education associations, what you did with this Department of Education, other groups I think that are represented here. I think it would be very beneficial for the community to know where the stance on, and if you have folks in those areas that are supportive of this, their thoughts, et cetera. I'd like to hear that and let the committee members hear that.
Obviously, as transparent as we could be here with this. And so we had met not only with parents that I've already discussed to you. We met with the different organizations and asked them to look at this and then to communicate with me, such as Gale, GSSA, GSBA. I think all those are sitting behind me here. GAE, we've had conversations with Department of Ed, which we're heavily involved in this. I feel comfortable telling you they might surprise me here at the podium, but I think all of that group I just named are friendly to this bill. Okay. and have had their parts in it. Let me think of PSC. I've called the PSC because PSC ultimately deals with the teachers that might do something wrong. There's a structure in place, and if you notice, that is not in this bill. That there's already a structure in place for if somebody does something in this state that is criminal. And so that is not changing any with this bill. And so the PSC was involved. I'm trying to think that there were many others. The governor's office, we've involved the governor's office in this discussion, and they've looked at the wording of it, and again, feel like I do, Mr. Chairman, that this is a student protection of their technology information that they use and have every day.
And my last question is given the points of the last time that Georgia really took a look at this was 2006, and that we've been, I don't know if you can say hopefully waiting on, but hopefully waiting on the federal government to act. And since they haven't acted, and we've heard the concerns of the public and even the organizations you mentioned, that it is time for us to address this, would you really deem this as more of a technology cleanup bill for education? Is that something that you would say is a fair statement?
Instead of clean up, Mr. Chairman, let's use update.
Fair.
Technology's changed so much. And I wouldn't doubt we don't need to look at this in a couple of more years from now. This is something that, the knowledge of the students using this stuff has gotten so much greater than 2006 or 2011. The people delivering these devices and using them as tools in their classroom has increased dramatically. We need to stay up with that technology. So update.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Now I'll turn it over to Representative Wilson for your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Representative, I want to thank you for your intent here. I think it's, I think it's clear that it's coming from a very good place. As you were walking us through this, I just had some questions, and I want to rely on your experience as a former superintendent on lines 210 through 211, where the state board is authorized to withhold a portion of the state funding. I'm curious, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, so this is where I'm going to draw on your experience and expertise. But are you aware of other requirements that we place on school districts local school districts where we say failure to comply or compliance that's deemed insufficient by, in this case, the state board, would jeopardize the state funding or a portion of the state funding. Is this a common provision that we put on the requirements that we put on local school districts? Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
I believe I do, and it starts with federal. Federal funding's withheld quite often if you don't meet the standards and the reporting that is required. And statewide, I'm trying to give you an example. Legislative Council might be able to tell me an example quicker than I could.
I can provide some specific citations, Representative. There's about 4 instances in Title 20. There's kind of a comprehensive provision under the Quality Basic Education Act that says if you do not comply with any education law, the State Board of Education has the authority to withhold state funding. And then there's a few targeted provisions throughout Title 20. I think there's 4 or 5 of them. This one has been in place from the onset of this bill. And it is one of the examples that we kind of refer to when we say that although it is not it's not everywhere throughout the title, this is one that's been there for a while.
And let me tell you, Representative Wilson, my intent with this is not to take the money for good. It is to get them into compliance and then to restore the funds that they qualified. Because you could imagine if you pull it and they need the filters or they need the technology, I feel like we're doubly hurting them, and we don't want to do that. What we want to do is get them to respond to our need of the filtering and give the Board of Ed the authority to oversee that in a using of their judgment as a governing body.
I think that's very helpful context. So I appreciate you indulging me on that. The only other question I had is, and this might be, Mr. Chairman, more appropriate to Legislative Council, but I wonder if there's not a need here to clarify the definition for acceptable use policy, or maybe somewhere else in this bill to clarify that this would not cover personal browsing on personal devices while off campus. Because as I read this as a lawyer, I don't see that that's explicitly excluded from this. There could be an acceptable use policy that covers what a student is browsing on their own computer, not a school issued laptop, but their own computer at home. But that violates, I'm going to use the term that you have here, digital citizenship. Appropriate digital citizenship, and that they won't be sanctioned at school for that, because that has nothing to do with the local school district.
It makes sense, and since you allowed me to include the Legislative Council, let him respond first, and I'll respond next, please.
Thank you. My understanding is that the scenario that you described, Representative Wilson, would really only be implicated in this bill if that private browsing was done over a server that was provided by the school system. So even if for some reason they connected their personal device to the school system server and were accessing the prohibited materials that way, then that would implicate this. But yeah, for purely unrelated searches that do not involve any technology of the school system, and this policy would not reach that activity.
And I agree with what he is saying, Representative, that these devices, your personal phone, we do not have the constitutional support to address them of a student. However, a state-owned device, in my understanding, is that we do have the constitutional support to censor that or grade appropriate. That would be a better way to put it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just flag the lines for everybody, and then I'm happy to speak with Legislative Council offline. I don't want to take up the committee's time, but
Certainly.
I'll just point the author and legislative council to where I'm looking. Starting at line 108, the sentence there, at a minimum, an acceptable use policy shall contain provisions which are reasonably designed to, and then skip down to subsection B, line 116, establish appropriate measures to be taken by the school or local school system in response to, and then skip over to line 123. Any person who is not a student or school employee who violates the acceptable, hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. Don't skip to line 123. Keep going to line 118. So starting from 116, establish appropriate measures to be taken by the school or local school system in response to students and school employees who violate the acceptable use policy, whether or not such student or school employee was at the time of such violation on school property, on a school bus, at a school-related function, or elsewhere, provided, however, that such measures shall include disciplinary measures. And in my reading there, and I'll get with legislative council about this, I just want us to be clear in the language here that we're not talking about personal activities on a personal device while at home, off campus, not on a school server.
We want it to be as clear as possible, and I'm amenable to that.
I'm certain, as I was going to say, I'm sure that Chairman Irwin will work with you and legislative council just to make sure that's clarifying. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to go to on Zoom. Representative Nguyen, hopefully you can join us now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions, and I think it's appropriate to have technology filters on school devices as well. I had a couple of clarifying questions. One, as it regards to the withholding of funding, how is that amount determined, and what process would take place to return those funds back?
Representative, that was left open-ended, and decision would be made by the Department of Education. That was intentionally done that way so the Department of Education could then look at the infraction and have a timeline on it, and then the amount to get the corrective action. So we did not spell out that it would be all the technology, half the technology money that they receive from the DOE, so that they would, again, the intent there, Representative, is to just get a corrective action and then get them back up to their funding level. And was the whole gist.
And just for clarification, I believe legislative council earlier did clarify that that's already existing, and this code section was covered, that they already have that authority, and superintendents in the state are aware of that. And it's usually only used in the order of an extreme situation. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens, and superintendents are usually aware of it. Is that a true statement?
Very rare use by the DOE in my experience.
Okay, thank you.
And
Representative, you have another question?
Yeah, I have a couple more questions. So in that same vein, this would, I assume, require a cost to implement for school systems. Is there funding that's appropriated already where school systems would be able to do this in a timely manner?
I'd say that since they have E-rate money that comes federally that they use for this, that it would not be an added cost.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question I had was just around, I know that you had clarification in the bill related to some carve outs, and scientific purposes are included in this. What about school districts that teach comprehensive sexual education?
Special education?
Comprehensive sexual education, sex ed.
Again, that's part of the carve out that would be a white list for your local system that you felt was grade appropriate within that local system. And the DOE is going to develop that and work with those.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. And now we'll turn to Representative Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so my questions, I did have a question about the personal device stuff, so that's helpful to know that we're going to work on that. Or just make it explicit that this doesn't apply to personal devices. Could you please help me find where you talk about the grade appropriate or this white list? Like, where is the language that talks about the adaptable standards according to age?
Michael, are you
Oh.
aware pretty quickly where that line is?
Yes,
Go ahead, Mike.
it would be starting at line 134. Paragraph 2 authorizes the school board to adopt standards that could differentiate based on age appropriateness or grade appropriateness.
So where's it? Okay, thank you. I was looking for the word age, so that's good. Thank you. Okay.
That we listed it represented by elementary, middle and high
Yeah, I
school.
see that. Yeah, that's, both areas. Okay, thank you. And then I had questions about, are any of these provisions waivable under our charter district or strategic waivers? Or is any of this waivable or not?
No,
No.
it is not. I personally feel that this is something that shouldn't be waived, especially if we had a whitelist opportunity there for the schools for materials they feel is acceptable, but the answer is no.
Okay,
We don't want it
that's
waived.
what I wanted to know that. Great. And then I think that answered all my, because I had another question that Representative Wynn asked too, but
Representative
that's
Evans,
it.
you think
I
you're
I'm-
good?
I think I'm good now. Thank you.
You waive, okay. All right, thank you very much. Well, I will reiterate this. I think it's obvious to me as chairman, and you've worked very hard with all kinds of groups on this issue, and you've been working diligently. I appreciate the time and effort you put into that, especially listening and getting feedback from folks that care about this issue. And we know that you're well versed in this area. So thank you for that. So I know if, as Representative Wilson indicated, if there's other questions, I'm sure you're willing to talk through those and then get with legislative counsel if there's a need to clarify things. At this time, we're going to allow, we've got 3 folks that signed up to speak. I'm going to ask those folks to come one at a time. And if everybody's okay, it's about 12 minutes till. I'm going to, well, let's start out with say 3 minutes a person for now. If that is not a sufficient amount of time, then I will, my prerogative, potentially allow you to go a little over, but I'll probably, be like a Braves fan and wave at you whenever you're getting, 10, 15 seconds. And then we can kind of go from there. Okay. So this time I'm going to ask, I'm just going to go in order of who signed up first. Mike Griffin, if you would come on up. And is 3 minutes going to be sufficient for you, sir? All right. All right.
My name is Mike Griffin. I'm the Public Affairs Representative for the Georgia Baptist Mission Board. And we are here to support Representative Irwin and his bill. And I also not only do I represent public affairs ministry and things like that with the mission board, but I'm also in charge of child protection policy and working with our churches to make sure that we have policies in line to make sure our children are protected. And so we're like, 110% behind this. We are for every level of protection that we can give to our children. We think it's very important that we always have transparency, and that is that there's always accessibility for our parents and others to be able to see what children are looking at so they'll know. We believe that, again, those safeguards that you're talking about putting in are so very important that we have those protections there. And then thirdly, accountability. That is, our leaders who are the ones responsible are held accountable so that they're going to be responsible in the way that they carry out their work. And so we think this is very important. We think we need to work hard at continue to do this. You know, in dealing with child protection policy, you know, the grooming process is one of the greatest dangers out here when it comes to sexual predators, sex trafficking and all of that. And pornography is at the center of that, or obscenity as we use in the legal terms here. So it's important our children be protected, because the last thing any of us want to do, I think, would be advocating any way of helping sexual predators or sex trafficking industry that uses obscenity to be able to groom kids for dangerous behavior. So we really do appreciate Representative Irwin, and we appreciate this bill, and we support it, and appreciate the committee's favorable vote for this today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you were under time, so I like that trend. Next up, the signed up is Taylor Hawkins, if you'll come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Taylor Hawkins with Frontline Policy Action. We represent families and family values across the state, and we just want to talk about how much we appreciate this bill, and Representative Irwin, and I thank Speaker Pro Tem as well for working on this bill, and all those who have had a hand in the process. I think it's definitely time for this update to the technology protection measures that our students experience. And speaking as a young person, I definitely know the power of technology and how necessary it is for inquisitive, curious minds to be given guidelines through which they can educate themselves properly without the unnecessary effects of obscene materials being injected into their education. So we love the bill. We think it's a part of a good broader movement with Senate Bill 226 and the parental rights bills that have come forward to protect children. And that should be, of course, the center of education policy in the states. We love the bill, appreciate the sponsor, and we appreciate the favorable consideration of this committee on this bill.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, man, these folks are bringing it in under time. I like this. All right. Next up, we have, and if you will beg my forgiveness if I'm going to try, Michaela Arriaga.
Very close.
All right.
Arciaga. Thank
Arciaga. I apologize.
And thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michaela Arciaga. I work for the Intercultural Development Research Association, otherwise known as IDRA. We are an independent education nonprofit. We also support the goal of protecting our children and providing greater transparency to parents. We would just mainly like to raise the concern about similar legislation that we have seen that uses the phrase obscenity to apply to topics that explain and address themes specifically from individuals with from marginalized communities, specifically racial, ethnic, and LGBTQ individuals, as well as religious minorities. We're concerned that the processes listed might allow for these materials to be removed or censored based on some of the, as I said, legislation we've seen in other states. That is our main concern that we wanted to flag. We just want to make sure that that language is clearly defined to protect the rights of our marginalized students, as well as our students' First Amendment rights to educational freedom. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I'm sure that the sponsor will be happy to talk to you if you have any specific examples that you're concerned with. Thank you very much. All right, well, I'll tell you what, the speakers today did phenomenally. All came in under time. Thank you very much for that. And at this time, I've got Chairman Dubnik. He would like to speak. Go ahead.
So, Vice Chairman Irwin, I got my start out of college in information security for a Fortune 100 company. And I had absolutely no idea what that meant. And that was my co-op job started in 2000. I was with that company and was able to experience what information security meant on September 11th. And the question in the room was posed of, do we need to shut down global commerce for a Fortune 100 company? And I thought that would be one of the greatest security questions in my career. The problem was, for the next 3 years, I spent time on corporate servers finding people who were grown adults who were looking at obscene materials. And I spent more time than I care to remember turning them over to HR And the final straw for me to leave that company, because I didn't want to deal with the obscene materials, was when I had to turn over a father and a Boy Scout leader in Seattle to the FBI because I was legally obligated to do so. And I changed my career because of that. These are grown adults, and I was a young adult at the time dealing with that. I tell you all that to say, I cannot imagine why anyone would be opposed to taking obscene materials away from our children, and to the gentleman speaking before, not only putting guardrails, but putting limits. And to your Bill's point, putting acceptable filters and hard stops. And that is something that I believe in the core of who I am. And I give you my greatest compliment for all the work that I know you've put into this bill and what you've done. You said it earlier, this is to protect and to secure. This is a comprehensive technology bill. And I'm with you. I don't care to go through it and to look through the definition of those obscene materials. Again, I compliment you on the grade level and the appropriateness that we give leeway to both the Georgia Department of Education and our local control and our local school boards to make those decisions. So I'm very proud to see this work before this education committee. I'm proud to be a sponsor of this. And the last thing that I would say is I believe that this House and this committee and this leadership has shown that we will protect our families and our children. I'm not, for 1 minute, I'm not willing to rely on the federal government's outlines, especially not when it relates to technology from 2011. So with that, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make a motion.
All right. Before we do that, I just want to make sure, Representative Irwin, do you have any final comments or statements that you'd like to make to the committee before I entertain that motion?
Yes, first, just thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that story too. I experienced a lot of educators in my career, and every one of them put students first, and every one of them tried to keep their classrooms safe. And I appreciate those people. And when I started my teaching career, I was mentored that way. And I'm still carrying that on today, that we need to think students first, and we need to protect them every day, every minute when they're in our care.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it as well. Could not repeat or say that any better than Chairman Dubnik. So ditto, and thank you for all your hard work. At this time, I will entertain that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that House Bill 1217 do pass.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well, online. And then any opposed? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Motion carries. This do pass. We will send it on to the full education committee. Thank you all for being here, and y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
We stand adjourned.